In this video, we'll go over a couple examples involving functions and their intercepts. All right, first, number one asks to find a such that the point, this should be point, not points, the point 2 comma negative 3 is on the graph of f of x equals ax squared minus 5. And it might be a little confusing exactly what is this question asking. But here's how we have to think about it. What we want, remember this, if 2 negative 3 is on the graph, is on the graph of f, then that means f of 2 is equal to negative 3. Okay, so let's start with that idea. F of 2 is equal to negative 3. And what is f of 2 equal to? Well, f of 2, well, let's start with f of x is equal to ax squared minus 5, which means f of 2 would be equal to a times 2 squared minus 5. And so I'm going to replace f of 2 with a times 2 squared minus 5 equals negative 3. I'm going to clean up this left-hand side. I'm going to simplify it. 2 squared is equal to 4, and I get 4 times a minus 5 is equal to negative 3. And now I'm just going to solve for a. So I'm going to get rid of the 4 and the negative 5. First, I get rid of the negative 5 by adding 5 to both sides of my equal sign. I get 4a equals positive 2. And next, I divide both sides by 4. These 4's cancel out. I'm left with a is equal to 2 divided by 4, which simplifies to 1/2. I divide top and bottom by 1/2. Let's double check that this works. If f of x is equal to ax squared minus 5, that's what we started with, and we decided that a is equal to 1/2, that means our function, once we plug in for a, is actually 1/2 x squared minus 5. And let's double check that when we plug in x equals 2, our output is negative 3. So f of 2 is equal to 1/2 of 2 squared minus 5. This ends up being 1/2 times 4 minus 5. Half of 4 is 2 minus 5 equals negative 3. And so when the input is 2, the output is negative 3, and that means 2, 3, the point 2, 3, 2, negative 3 is on that graph. Next, we're going to do number 2, which is we're going to list the x and y intercepts of x squared minus 5x minus 14. Let's start with the x. We'll actually start with the y-intercept because it's a little bit easier. I'm going to rewrite the problem, or at least the function. So the function we're looking at is f of x equals x squared minus 5x minus 14, if I'm not mistaken. All right, and remember, to find the y-intercept, let x equal 0 and solve for y. And remember, y is really the same as f of x. So in this case, what I'm really doing is I'm going to find f of 0. So I'm going to plug in x equals 0, and that ends up being 0 squared minus 5 times 0 minus 14. And this ends up being 0 minus 0 minus 14, which is negative 14. So when I plug in 0 as my input, my output is negative 14. So that tells me that the point 0, negative 14 is on the graph, and that is a y-intercept. All right, next let's find the x-intercept, or possibly the x-intercepts. There might be more than one. To find the x-intercept, let y equal to 0, aka let f of x equal 0, and solve for x. So I'm going to just take this equation right here, and I'm going to rewrite it with f of x equal to 0. And what we end up with is a quadratic equation, and we need to solve this quadratic equation. We need to solve for x. Now, to solve a quadratic, this is a skill that hopefully you learned in Algebra 2. There are many different ways to solve quadratics. You could use a quadratic formula always. You can graph a quadratic and find the x-intercepts in that way. Or in this case, we can actually factor this quadratic formula, because I can think of two numbers that multiply to get negative 14, but add to get negative 5. Can you figure out what those numbers would be? Well, if I do negative 7 times 2, that's equal to negative 14. And if I do negative 7 plus 2, that's equal to negative 5. And what that tells me is that I can factor out two expressions. I can express this as a product of two monomials, which would be x minus 7 and x plus 2. And if x minus 7 times x plus 2 is equal to 0, that means either x minus 7 is equal to 0, or x plus 2 is equal, I think I said it wrong. Let me start again. X minus 7 equals 0, or x plus 2 equals 0. And so then I just have two simple equations that I can solve. I'll add 7 to both sides here, and I end up with x equals 7. And in this equation, I subtract 2 from both sides. I end up with x equals negative 2. So these are the zeros of this function, but I want to find the x-intercepts. I should express those as points. So the x-intercepts of f are 7, 0, and negative 2, 0. Now, if you're going to do a problem like this and you have your graphing calculator, it's a great idea to just check your answers. And so let me just remind you what our answers are. We think that 0, negative 14 is the y-intercept, and 7, 0, and negative 2, 0 are the x-intercepts. Let's go to Desmos, graphing calculator, and we're going to do x squared. I think it was minus 5x minus 14. And let's check these intercepts. Notice that the y-intercept is right here. If I click on it, we see that that y-intercept is indeed 0, negative 14, as we calculated. And the x-intercepts are negative 2, 0, and 7, 0. As you can see, we got the same exact answers as we did by graphing it. Okay? All right, I hope that's helpful. Good luck, and we will see you in the next video.